All right. I don't think it's necessarily a shocker to say that Resident Evil Zero isn't beloved like a lot of these other Resident Evil games are. Um, and I'm sure as hell do not like Resident Evil Zero. I think it's unnecessary. That seems what everyone thinks. It's unnecessary. It's done to death gameplay, and it just basically reuses assets from the remake of RE1. It's unnecessary, and then as far as Zero Hour by S.D. Perry goes, it's also unnecessary. But is it as bad as the game? No, but I wouldn't say it's particularly great. Uh, Zero Hour is about Rebecca Chambers and Bravo team investigating grisly murders in the woods outside Raccoon City. They come across a military transport where the soldiers are killed. They see the ID of a guy named Billy who is on trial for mass murder. So Rebecca is tasked with finding him. When she finds him, she realizes that not everything is what it seems. They see this weird dude singing, and all these giant leeches attack this train car they're in, and they're forced into an adventure that involves dealing with Umbrella's T-Virus, along with some other things. What did I think of Zero Hour? Zero Hour is, unfortunately, like every prequel that seems to be. When people take a dump on the Star Wars prequels, I usually say it's because they haven't read the novelizations or tie-in media. Because of the tie-in media, novelizations, comics, that sort of thing, those prequels are pretty good. With most prequels, it is unnecessary storytelling. All we needed to know in RE1 / The Umbrella Conspiracy, if you read the novelization, is that Umbrella was testing a virus called the T-Virus. There was an outbreak of it, and there was a man in the shadows that was helping out Jill Valentine. Also, one of the members of STARS was a traitor. And we know this pretty early on that he's a traitor. It's Albert Wesker. That's not a big spoiler. That's common knowledge now. With the Weskers known more for his end than his beginnings. Because, I mean, he ends up being a boss battle in a volcano where Chris Redfield on steroids punches a boulder. I talked about it in the last review. I gotta talk about it again because that's just flipping ridiculous. But we get Wesker in here, and he's setting things up for Umbrella Conspiracy. We also get the scientist that ends up being the guy infected with the G-Virus in RE2. They have some history with our main antagonist, who is this guy who wants revenge for an Umbrella scientist that was killed in order to steal his research. And there's more to him than meets the eye, although it's not Transformers. It's just leeches. Yes, this is the gooey leech Resident Evil is what I always think of Resident Zero as. It's also the we haven't finished RE4 yet, but we have to put a Resident Evil game out. Let's throw this thing out and reuse assets. I say that because RE0 is lazy. It's very, very lazy. And this novelization, I wouldn't say is lazy. It feels tired, which is weird. There was a 2-year gap between Code Veronica and this book. And in that time, it seems like S.D. Perry kind of lost her touch with Resident Evil. Rebecca's fine, and characterization she adds to Billy makes him more likable. In the game, I always found Billy to be a lazy, lacking character. I mean, he's not as bad as Steven from Code Veronica, but who is? Um, Maybe Ashley. I don't know. At least Ashley's useless in a way that makes sense, whereas Steven's just annoying. I still can't get over the fact that people like Steven. I don't get it. And I also don't get the love for Code Veronica. Games that are hard for the sake of being hard aren't necessarily good games. Just saying. Um, but Zero Hour is just. It's a lot of plot contrivance that doesn't really work because we have to get Jill to where she is in the Umbrella Conspiracy, which this book almost does, but I mean, Jill's doing a whole hell of a lot in this. And in my opinion, it takes away from her character development that we got in the first two novels, Umbrella Conspiracy and Caliban Cove. In Umbrella Conspiracy, she is the extremely naive scientist member of STARS that she's only doing the combat stuff because it's required of her. It's not her expertise. And then in Caliban Cove, she becomes the hero that we all know and love. That's sort of her story arc. But in this, she is. It would have been annoying, I suppose, to make her like a bumbling fool. But she's like kicking ass and stuff in this, and it doesn't really make sense. I think I know why it wouldn't have been like in Resident Evil books, other than Code Veronica, the characters, the two protagonists typically pull their own weight, and it's like equally distributed. So I get what she's trying to do here, and plus you play as both Rebecca and Billy. My big problem with RE0 is that it shouldn't be Rebecca Chambers. I get you don't want to have your protagonist die at the end, but it should have been unrelated characters. I don't mind Billy being there. I would have liked another member of STAR's Bravo team that possibly is bitten, has to sacrifice himself, because Rebecca's the only girl on Bravo team, so it would have been another dude. It doesn't go with the RE formula, I know. Until we get to RE4, which I guess technically Ada Wong is the other character. She's not even I can't call her a protagonist in RE4. Leon is the protagonist. Leon's the one you play through most of the game, and then you unlock the Ada stuff, and it's just side missions basically. But yeah, you don't want to have two dudes there. But it would have been nice to have maybe one of the Bravo team zombies in the Spencer estate was the protagonist. It would have been better. I don't know. I really don't know. It's fine for what it is. I don't care for the proto-tyrant they fight near the end, because they can't fight a tyrant, so they fight something tyrant adjacent, and that's a little dumb. It just felt shoehorned in, because just like the tyrant fight in Code Veronica was, they're both shoehorned in. We don't need a tyrant fight in every RE book. We don't. Especially after Nemesis, you're not going to top Nemesis at this point. Like, Nemesis is like the coolest of the tyrants. He's the scariest one by far. I mean, the T-Rex tyrant in Underworld was pretty fun, but I didn't take that particularly seriously, you know. But overall, what would I rank Zero Hour? It's a 3.4 out of 5. Better than Code Veronica, which I think I gave a 3 out of 5 on. That's what I think I did. I can't remember. It is a step up from Code Veronica. Not a full step. It's more like a 3/4 step up from Code Veronica. But sadly, I don't think people liked this one, and S.D. Perry never wrote another Resident Evil novel again. Resident Evil would go on to instead do animated films not long after this, which I do recommend most of those. They're pretty fun if you're a hardcore RE fan, and they stay in continuity with the games, unlike the live action films. I wish there were novelizations for those. I wish there were novelizations. Honestly, if they had stuck it out a little longer and done an RE4 novelization, I think it would have sold better than any of these other books ever did. I seriously mean that, because this is right when we're getting like the Halo novels are coming out around this time. We got a little after this, like Mass Effect, God of War, Gears of War, even some StarCraft stuff. Like video game, and like even like the Tom Clancy stuff, like the Splinter Cell novels, or like hell, End War. Like there's a ton of video game novelizations that came out after this. So it's a shame, because these RE novelizations, for being mostly video game novelizations, they don't always feel like it. And SD Perry had a special way of making like all the in-game puzzles and inventory stuff feel organic and make sense. So it's a shame they never went forward with these, but I get it after how kind of funky the last few are, that we didn't get anymore. So anyway, have a nice day.